Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. Listen, folks, before we really dive into it, I wanted to say that a few days ago, Jim and I did, as part of our another podcast we do, It's Never Just a Movie, where we talk a bit more about outside of the film, but in the film business or how it affects culture, that kind of thing. We did a great, a really fun stream about the winners and losers of the recently now pretty much over Writers Guild strike. That doesn't change the simple fact, folks, that the actors are still on strike. So just in case you're wondering, we will be showing our support for them with the little bug down below until they have a good agreement and they're back to work. Of course, also there'll be a link below. I'll put it in the show notes or on a pinned comment, a link to the Entertainment Community Fund if you wanted to. That's kind of their strike fund. It's something where anyone in the industry affected by the work stoppage can reach out for financial support while that industry is going through that. It may not include the how can I put this? The 12 who the top paid 12 who put the industry in this situation, who last year made $341 million, only topped by the year before, where three of them somehow managed to scrimp by with $800 million. Anyway, moving forward. Tonight, Jim and I are going to be overanalyzing filmmaker Denny Goulet's Indigenous First Nations filmmaker Denny Goulet's Night Raiders. But first, mind giving us a quick rundown of who's in it?
Sure. The film is directed by, I believe it's a first-timer, Dani Goulet. That's D-A-N-I-S. She's a woman filmmaker. It is starring Elamaya Tailfeathers, who won a Canadian Screen Award for her role, and also Brooklyn Letexier-Hart. Amanda Plummer is in it, Violet Nelson, and Alex Tarrant, he from the Lord of the Rings Amazon Prime series. I think he plays a character named Valendil. Otherwise it is... Sorry, just bear with me. It is the cinematography is by Daniel Grant, and the music is by Moniker. And it's also executive produced by, amongst others, Taika Waititi has a hand in this as well. So,
yeah, no, very exciting. Jim, in a sentence. Oh, excuse me. Or actually, no. First, let me ask you this.
Sure.
See it or skip it?
This is probably a soft see it for me. I did like elements of it. I don't think the movie ultimately knows what it wants to be, whether a straight-ahead dystopian tale or a First Nations story, and I like the First Nations aspect of it way more.
You know, that's interesting. I think that's kind of... I read some critiques from the general audience, half expecting to just read... like all comment sections, awfulness. But they kind of horned in on that as well. A lot of people seem to kind of, I don't want to say complain, but noted it's like uses a lot of YA dystopian tropes in that. That said, Jim, and we'll probably get into this more later. I'm actually a little, let's say softer. softer on this film, which means it's a harder see it. It's a solid see it, especially it's on video.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you $5. See the thing.
Wine.
And what I was watching is, it's certainly an indigenous, a First Nations film, how do we take this piece of, the residential schools experience and just the general settler destruction of culture, but apply it to a genre film, and a dystopian genre, post-apocalyptic, almost it's The Handmaid's Tale, except with a bit more of that YA genre expectations. And so I was fine with it. I was fine that it seemed that Goulet was trying to say, here, I like these genre films. I just want to bring my experience to it and my community's experience to it. And I enjoyed that. It reminded me there are going to be differences, which we'll get into in the spoiler zone, but it reminded me a lot of Blood Simple or Blood Quantum, which is it's a zombie flick, but deeply from an indigenous context.
Yeah. Blood Quantum. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I stumbled on Blood Simple, and then I'm like,
sorry, no, and then the signal cut out on you for a sec there, so that's, I didn't hear.
Well, the internet, Riverside, Riverside, me again,
still on strike.
Yeah, well, were they ever on enough to not be on strike? All right, Jim, why don't we? I think this is a perfect time to jump into the spoiler zone. The spoiler zone!
FX.
Gotta love the effects.
That's good. No, I love it.
I'm all about the effects, Jim. Okay. Before, I got a number of questions for you about this flick, but we watched this at a particular point in time here in Canada. And this is, folks, if you end up seeing this on replay, it's September 28th, 2023, where you and I are at this interesting nexus. Canada is still having an incredibly difficult time coming to terms with that imperialist settler past, especially as seen in the residential schools challenge, or in the residential schools horror challenge. It was a challenge. The horror. We're still, excavating mass graves because the powers that be was like, I don't know, telling the parents that their kid died or providing a body or really doing much of anything seems like a lot of work. Bury them out in the back. Or worse, covering horrible abuse up. We're also at a time where in the House of Commons, our parliament, the whole chamber cheered a guy that it wouldn't have been that hard to figure out. It wasn't a big mystery to be uncovered like some, investigative journalism. It's yes, a Ukrainian, but a guy who joined the Waffen-SS to fight the Russians. Although, many horrors visited on many people that weren't Russian at all, including on their own fellow Ukrainians. Especially if they're Jewish or, never mind those Poles, etc. And on our national broadcaster, the CBC, never mind the National Post, that white ring wag, they are, and I swear to God, folks, this does relate to the film we're talking about. They were worried, and I'll put a link, they were worried, those were worried about this poor old man, which just blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Wither, Jim, the poor Anyway,
Yeah.
while at the same time, you and I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where the police have, on good authority, figured that two women that were Indigenous women who were murdered by a serial killer are probably got thrown in the local landfill.
Mm-hmm.
They're not 100% sure, but they got a high degree of confidence. Of course, then they told the family members, these other women, it's like, yeah, it's not really feasible to dig them up. Like, I mean, that would cost us money. This is the time we are watching this film.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about this flick? As a, I mean, we're both, you're not Indigenous. You are part of the settler experience. And I don't even mean that pejoratively. But I think it's important to identify that. How did you react to this film, given where we are right now?
Well, when I was thinking about, we're going to be talking about this tonight, earlier today, and you sort of, walk around and you think of how what you're going to talk about and how you're going to express it. I thought, well, a dystopian story about First Nations people. And I thought to myself, well, a lot of their story, unfortunately, is kind of dystopian already. Yeah. You don't need the science fiction, the near future. This movie is set in 2044.
Yeah.
2044 apparently. So 20 years from now. It's not that. It's kind of interesting because here's the new boss. Here's the new science fiction boss, same as the old boss. So kids are still being separated from their families. Every kid. In this case, it also happens to be First Nations children as well. Yep. Again, we have the 60s scoop, which is named after a decade that wasn't that long ago. So in our lifetimes.
Well, perfectly analogous to what we saw on the screen with, the police rolling in and rounding kids up. Mm-hmm. How dare you keep your children close to you?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
I cut you off there.
No. It adds to it. But so I mean, it's like, is the futuristic setting even necessary? It's nothing to the filmmaker obviously had a vision of what they wanted to do, but I don't think you necessarily even need that filter of being something set in the near future. To add to that, not only is it the landfill issue right now, it's the plotting the Nazi in Parliament. We're actually this weekend is and I don't want to say holiday weekend, but for those of our viewers who aren't from Canada, it's Truth and Reconciliation Day on Saturday, and that's one that hasn't been around that long, just a few years now. Is it the third or the fourth, I want to say? And basically it's a way to acknowledge what's been done to that part of Canada, the First Nations, Inuit and Métis people. And we're all encouraged to wear orange, which I changed into my orange shirt. Apparently my iron is on strike still, but
I'm a terrible human being who has a perfectly fine orange shirt.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, the other one was my BC Lion shirt, which I thought was sort of, not of the same meaning. But anyway, and a lot of the landmarks and bridges and things will be lit up orange this weekend. So that's also happening at the same time. So there's a real schism. I think there's this sort of cluelessness in general. And on top of that, there's your average folks are willing, there's marches, Saturday there'll probably be another demonstration, that kind of thing. So,
I believe the landfill is back to being blockaded, or it was this morning.
Yeah, there was some activity there,
Yeah.
but and I've been out there too. Not lately, but I've been out there for birding. It's a very popular birding area, especially in the spring. So it's sort of a weird, yeah, it's sort of a weird kind of place for a lot of things converge there anyway. So, yeah, so I see it really of being two parts. You have the sort of the people not being able to read the room, and then there's the other people, you know, white middle class people like me included that acknowledge and you know would like to see some change and that sort of thing too. So there's a you know it's kind of a weird, yeah, it's all over the place really.
Yeah. Yeah, for myself, it's one of those things where I'm angry and a little ashamed. You know, maybe shame isn't the word I'm looking for. You know, you know what? We can learn we can learn things from all like many communities, including First Nations. That very idea of reconciliation. Also big in South Africa, but you know.
Yes, yeah.
But I think another thing we can learn, another community, you know, that still is struggling, but I think in some ways does a better job than we do you know, working through its past is Germany. Okay, maybe not Lower Saxony, you know.
Yeah.
But
certain parts.
Yeah, you know what? You know that very idea. You know, when a young German isn't going, well, I don't feel guilty about it. I wasn't there. I didn't do it, but I am responsible, not for it, but to understand it, to know it, and to, let's say, keep watch. You know, to keep that memory alive and to keep watch. You know, that's my responsibility, not to feel guilty. That does nothing for anyone. You know, and I think that's a thing Canadians have a really difficult time. You know, is to understand. It's like, yeah, no one's blaming you for what happened at Confederation or, you know, you can be responsible for your behavior now. And yeah, what are you doing to understand that past and, you know, watch for how it, you know, how you can reconcile for these folks who are still suffering the impact of that, you know? And I do think it's interesting in this film, Jim. I kind of like, I get there's a dystopian context. There's this rapper, sci-fi dystopian. I'm not sure. I didn't like the YA thing because it seemed to be, it's like, no, it's about mothers. The lead character is the mother, not the daughter. We do see her. She is the chosen one. She's got magical abilities. I'd say spoiler alert, but you know,
Yeah.
we all heard the megaphone.
We all did.
We all heard
yes.
the spoiler zone megaphone. Ooh,
The-
I have a name for it now, Jim.
The dystopian loudspeaker.
This film seems to be as much about, reconnecting, and a story about women, you know, with their children, women relating to other women, parents relating to each other about this idea of trying to keep their children close and safe, etc.
Yeah, and you know, that's a good point. And
And of course, the only area the government ever and I'm talking about in North America, excluding, let's say, Can-Am, where, oh, wait a second, you want to marry children? Whoa, we better. Religious freedoms here.
Yeah. Add to all that we discussed, all the current events and all the things going on. Manitoba, where Rob and I happen to live, the province of Manitoba, directly right in the middle of Canada. We, depending, and I can't comment on it too much because of my occupation, my part-time occupation, but we may very well have our first
Indigenous.
First Nations premiere this time next week. So, yeah, so there's a lot going on, and it sort of permeates a lot of the city or the province,
Well,
or
especially
lives,
when you look at. So, folks, for those of you who don't know, we're Manitoba. There's, let's say, you've got the New Democratic Party, which is a social democrat kind of party, center left, and then on what used to reside firmly in the center right, but like a lot of right wing parties around the world have just been moving to further and further to the right. Our own provincial party and all their last push is really they've picked a bunch of people within the NDP caucus. We do have a more like a British style parliamentary system versus an American one. And within this caucus, a lot of these women of color, queer, like non-binary of color, indigenous, and all crime. Like, I think if you're an American, just make them all African American and say the same crazy, absolute crazy crap. And this is this last push. I appreciate Jim given your employment role. You can't necessarily jump in on this, so I will.
Sure,
but I can.
Yeah.
And so we're all, but all of let's say I can speak with some confidence. The Western world is struggling with this, much like the Western world was struggling with this in the 30s. We might be seeing the end of another Gilded Age, as much as the Zuckerbergs, the Musks, the Zaslavs will fight against it. We may actually be seeing a more organized pushback instead of just, crazy mobs. But it's an interesting time, and this film kind of points at a lot of it.
The provincial election. I don't think we actually said the phrase though.
Oh, yes.
It's a provincial election. That's on
in like 5
the 3rd.
days.
Yeah, on the 3rd of October, which I believe is the Tuesday.
Yeah,
I want to say.
Yeah,
so,
next week, man.
Yeah, we'll find out then. But keep posted. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Let's get back to this flick, though. And on a more, got a little heavy there, and only related to the film and the themes, but maybe more any deeper, and then maybe that's for It's Never Just a Movie.
Yeah.
But we're like 3 minutes in, and the chosen one, the child. What is the character's name again? Just a sec.
Wasis.
Wasis, thank you. Wasis is, got her eye on a bird. All I can think is, Jim will know what that bird is.
I think it was supposed to be an eastern kingbird, but I didn't see the tail very well. It was probably computer generated, but the Latin for the eastern kingbird is Tyrannus tyrannus, which gives you an idea of its character. I don't know all the names, just the interesting ones. So all the Latin names.
Well, that was
just
glad you remembered that one.
Yeah.
Okay, Tyrannus tyrannus. There was a number of films I thought of, but I think for some of the vibe, it gave me, at least early on, it gave me a Handmaid's Tale vibe, not the television show, which, not knocking the television show, but that's like almost, it became its own thing. I'm talking about the film and really the book, especially that voiceover at the beginning where it's, you get some of the YA aspects, but you're also, it's like, oh, okay, wait a second. I mean, how does the Handmaid's Tale book end? You know, it's this idea you're given it's wrapped, but you're given an idea of, well, this too shall pass. What did you think? What films were you thinking of when you watched this? What vibe did you recognize here?
Well, I was getting some of that. I don't know if I want to say Hunger Games necessarily, but there have been a lot of that. You know, people cobbling together a living. You know, scrounging for food. That kind of. We did one. What was that one? Probably last January. It was like our first movie of last year. It had Vapor or something like that. It was
Vesper.
Vesper, yes.
Yeah.
Vapor.
Yeah.
I knew it was something
another youth
wispy.
with kind of magical intellectual abilities.
So
or
it
something.
sort of reminded me of movies like that. One of the aspects I liked about it was that it was this one, Night Riders, was very it was kind of Canadian. It gave me a real Canadian feel. So Handmaid's Tale is from the mind of Margaret Atwood, a Canadian, and all the you know, how they were dressed and walking through that either pre or post winter landscape. I sort of caught that vibe. Just that general, the school bus, it made me think of the Sean Penn movie, which the one escapes me right now. But yeah, a lot of that kind of the more I realize it, the more, exactly, Vesper. So it did give me those sort of indie dystopian movie feels. And there's been a few of them, and you know, I jokingly too, there's a Saturday Night Live parody of the dystopian youth fiction called The Group Hopper, and it's one that I watch probably about 3 or 4 times a year because it's quite hilarious. But you know, it underlines all the, you know, it's the new guy coming into camp and he's learning all about you world build through his eyes because he's learning everything. And he says, you know, what's over that ridge? He goes, oh, nothing but the death fires and, you know, things like that. So you know, and you're lucky you came on category day. And what's category day? And, you know, it sort of goes on like that.
Yeah.
Pete Davidson is the lead. The big part of it, you know, how'd you get that name, Thero? And he goes, I don't know. I never met my parents. It's tattooed on my back. And they look at his back and it says, that doesn't say Thero. It says the hero. So a little bit on the nose. But it's sort of, I mean, it sort of wrecked dystopian movies for me a little bit. But it's a really funny 3 minutes. So.
Hey, Jim, I want to quickly interrupt here and in the spoiler zone and shout out.
Sure.
We've got a couple of folks in the chat.
Okay.
First of all, of course, the Brock Upside.
No, Cody.
And a man, the hardest working man on the film YouTube scene, Sean from Lost in the Reel.
Oh, hey. Yeah, I hadn't watched.
Great to see you guys.
I had, you know, sometimes I've gotten behind on my movie review watching, and I open up YouTube, and sometimes it gives you a selection to look at. And I hadn't seen Sean's just randomly in a while, and one of them just popped up today. So I thought, oh yeah, crap! So much to watch. It kind of never ends, but it's all good. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, great to see you guys.
Hey guys,
the Brock Upside, Jim. Of course, Cody from the Brock Upside, who just did a review on that the creator. Saw it on, or he saw it in IMAX, of course, but they're using these Sony FX3s, these little mini cine cameras, so it's kind of an interesting story of the biggest format with, okay, not the smallest cameras, but, you know, things, another conversation for It's Never Just a Movie. Maybe Cody, come on. But he's got that out. And then, of course, Sean, Cody says Raiders. I don't see no football. Woo.
Yeah. I tried to do a little bit. Sometimes I do a little bit of a Twitter scan to see how a movie was received, or if usually it's yay, movies are great. But all I came up with was Las Vegas Raiders stuff.
Yeah.
Just tonight's football night, Raiders play something, so it'd be Night Raiders, right? And it's just, it was kind of frustrating. But I was also thinking if you had a comment, it could be Night Raiders and have a little more of a pleasant title. Anyway.
Well, I thought for sure, like somebody, like as soon as I saw the comment, I'm like, oh, is this going to be like a Raiders of the Lost Ark? Raiders of the Lost Children.
Yes.
Raiders of the Stolen Children. Lost in the Real. Boy, this Lost. Sean says, of course, he misses us. Who wouldn't? We're a delight, Sean. He's looking forward to hearing our thoughts on this one. Earlier we already did our see it or skip it. And Sean, to quickly recap, Jim, you were a soft see it, but still a see it. Yeah, and I was a little more solid on the see it. I think it's worth watching this genre, in an indigenous, a modern indigenous context. Whereas Jim may be a little softer, but we're still like, it's on video, man.
Yeah,
check it out, Sean.
They
can come back and tell us what you think, or send us a link to your review of it.
I thought it was a little heavy on the this dystopian stuff that we've seen before. Every movie has a hook. What's the hook in this movie? It's the First Nations overlay, or I shouldn't say overlay because it's an important part, but it's the First Nations aspect to it. I wanted to see more. There's First Nations language in this. There's characters with Niska, Sonomis, Wasis, and they don't have sort of English, like it's not Niska, but you can call me Lulu or something. There's nothing like that. They're referred to their First Nations name only, and that is kind of awesome, I think. And good roles for women. It wasn't all men, even though it's sort of a fighty show. And it was there was a lot to like about this. I just wish it had sort of broken away from the some of the standard dystopian stuff that we've seen before.
Well, or let me. I see your point, and I see some of the other critics' point.
Yeah.
Maybe what could have elevated it is, and I keep thinking of Blood Quantum, notwithstanding the late
I'll look it up.
Oh my goodness, I can't remember the guy's name now. Notwithstanding that late filmmaker's blocking of me on Twitter.
Yes.
Part of what I think how Blood Quantum works is it hammers on both. It is
Jeff Barnaby.
Thank you, Jeff Barnaby. Yeah, the late Jeff Barnaby definitely died too young. He in Blood Quantum, that is a solid zombie flick with all the genre expectations, but he hammers down on the gross and the horror, and it follows those expectations, but he's also deep, like presses all the those indigenous themes that are built into the movie. Here, maybe it is, and I'm not even sure, maybe I have to rewatch it, but maybe here this film could have been elevated if it pushed a little further into dystopia, instead of kind of going, well, no, we've seen this in YA dystopia, which is always kind of a light sort of surface view of, how terrible we can be to each other. Does that make any sense, Jim? Or
Yeah. I mean, there's several ways that everything that we watch or read is a product of a million different decisions. So you gotta stick with the one that they deliver.
Stick with
to
the
you,
one that brung you.
Yeah, but no, I mean, there's still a lot to like about this. Elamaya Tailfeathers, who's the lead character in this, Niska, the mother of Wasis,
Yeah.
she's also in Blood Quantum, and
Mm-hmm.
several other things. She was in Three Pines, the Amazon Prime series with Alfred Molina, as well as I think she's part. I didn't watch it, my wife did, but she's part of his investigative crew. I believe she's a Quebec police woman or something to that effect. But anyhow, yeah, so she was very good. And it's always good to see Amanda Plummer. Before I went to New York, I watched Fisher King again. And man, she's so awesome in that movie. Yeah.
Well, what did I watch recently? Again, not parts of it, because I was trying to zero in on I was trying to figure something out.
Uh-oh.
No, never mind.
He's-
In Quentin Tarantino. So I'm watching the restaurant portion of
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction, and just what a crazy force of nature she can be.
Oh, yeah.
But here in this flick, and this is, I'm wondering, and it's always risky, but I'll put it out there. Is there a gendered aspect to this film? One of the reasons, like, Blood Quantum that's barbecued steak. You know, it's big horror, big gross, and big drama. Whereas here, and very much what I would say when I worked at the city of Winnipeg, I thought about this idea of, governance. Are you a big barbecue guy? I want big solutions with big fire, and which is most elected officials. Or are you making stew that takes a long time and it's not very dramatic and it's subtle, but boy, is it filling. It gives a warmth and a comfort, because you look at this film and again, it's not, this is where I keep stumbling on there's some YA tropes in here, but it's not a YA dystopia. It is about this woman and her relationship with other adults trying to get their children, and there's a softness here, a different kind of, it's not barbecue. It's stew.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I had written down as one of my final thoughts that I hadn't really put down, but just in my notes, I thought, this is a very low key movie in a lot of ways. Even the violence, there's some gunplay, but there's no, probably for budget reasons, there's no big explosions. So everything's sort of, the drones do a lot of the nasty work, but it's very low key. There's a couple scenes in this, one in which Wasis, the young First Nations girl, meets up with a young teen, a black kid, black boy, or teenage boy, and probably for the first time has seen somebody of her own age. And they meet for about 5 minutes. He wants to impress her, so he shows off a drone that's been shot out of the sky, and it sort of comes alive, and they have a very brief encounter. They both run, and he's arrested. And the horror of that,
and you get this idea that maybe the dad is shot.
Yeah,
like,
well,
you hear
it
it
just
stay down,
yeah.
but you also hear a gunshot, and it's like, well, there's a cop shooting a black guy, and then go and stay down. Quit resisting.
And but it's not dwelt on, like, it's not thrown in your face. The music doesn't there's not a big crescendo. It's very quietly a tragedy, and then they sort of go on to the next thing. And then there's another scene later on where a character is sort of recognizes her brainwashed son, tries to sort of commiserate with him, and he shoots her. He shoots her dead. And that too is man, that's horrifying. But they don't overdo it. They don't have the soundtrack isn't screaming at you, and it's horrifying, and it's sad, and it's a product of the world that they live in here. But like you said, I don't think at any point does this tell you how to feel this movie,
Yeah.
or if it does,
lets
it's
the
less
act
than normal.
speak for itself.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it lets the performers be. You know, we've said it before, but I think this is it breathes.
Yeah.
You know, lets the performers breathe. It lets the scene breathe. It doesn't. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't dwell, but at the same time, it's not. It's not frenetic.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't even show.
Oh yeah.
They don't even show the body of the mother when the son shoots her. Like they don't dwell on it. Like it's she's obviously been killed, and they don't sort of like have a big lingering camera on it or anything like that. It's
like you say, music or the slow-mo and silence.
Yeah. Yeah, slow-mo. There's no slow. I don't think there's any slow-mo in this movie. It's another.
Yeah, and it's digital. Slow-mo ain't expensive like it was back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
Where was I? I can't remember. Oh,
just barbecue and stew and
stew. Okay, so I'm not necessarily totally off on that.
No, I found it. Yeah, I found it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That relationship amongst parents and especially amongst mothers, I think it's, you know what? It's not. And while it's a. You know what? I might circle back to this.
Sure, yeah.
Another thing. Okay, again, at the beginning, like there's some images. There's the first Niska's sister daughter said, we could have eaten that.
Yeah.
Over, and then later, Mom, what's the difference between? And I tell you, Jim. There's a part of me thinking that's, what's the word I'm looking for? Like when kids in trouble, then they're like, you're into this. I'll ask you about that to get off the topic. There's these naturalistic moments that are really enjoyed. But I also, I wrote it down and I'm like, is that like a theme reference or am I missing something later on or... because she was asking about the difference between werewolves and vampires and aren't they the same? Yeah. And the mother's like, which on one level I'm like, well, that's a dumb question, which goes back to my theory. It's like just to get Mom off the topic of I should have got the bird, which is also a huge hint that the daughter is special because she doesn't have a weapon, but obviously the mother thinks she can do something.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that part was a little unclear as well because I thought maybe she was communing with nature a little bit, and then at the very end, it turns out that she actually can control the drone. So I think that could have been delivered. Yeah, delivered a lot. I don't have any aversion for that.
Although we do see other hints, also with the drone, it's still breathing.
That's right too. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I just thought she heard something that he couldn't or something.
Like little spices that you put in a stew versus no, I crank it up.
Yeah, yeah.
I got this barbecue sauce and then some hot sauce. Take this big slab of meat.
She's a little more sensitive to these things than others are, say. Yeah, okay. I get it. Yeah.
What about the Emerson reference?
Oh, remind me what the Emerson...
always, you can get citizenship in Emerson, the Emerson Corporation or something. And I was trying to figure it out. And then part of me is because I don't think the director, while she's Cree, I don't think she's Cree from these parts. And Manitoba has a lot of Cree and OG Cree First Nations, but not that I could tell. But I was trying to go, what's going on there? What's the deal with Emerson?
Yeah. Well, there's two different places that they talk about as being sort of.
You know what? She is from Larange, Saskatchewan. So.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so
prairies, a prairie girl. There's two different places that they talk about in this film that are. sort of aspirational. One of them is Emerson, where you can get your citizenship and sort of become more part of the community. The other one is that the Heidi place, 3 weeks up the road, deep in the woods. I forgot what they referred to it as, but so everything sort of occurs in between Emerson and this wood village in the woods. And so I think it's that sort of tension between the two. Do you go farther into their world, or do you escape farther into your own? And I think that's one of the sort of the lines of tension that are drawn throughout this movie.
Yeah. What about like, and that's all I could think of when they refer to the Jamestown Cathedral.
Oh yes, yeah.
And of course I'm thinking Jamestown. Well, of course Jamestown, the some of the early colonists at Jamestown, but it also reminded me of Jonestown.
Yeah.
And then of course the cathedral church. Yeah, I get that part. Is one of the main proponents and organizers and implementers of the Canadian and American, like the Can-Am residential school system. We will not kill, to quote, I think it was an American general or an American politician of that era, but we're all in let's say a North American settler who says, we will not kill the indigenous, I'm putting that phrase in there, but we'll kill their culture. And that is how we will, which is like just horrific.
Yeah.
What else? Do you think there's anything else she was trying to tell us in this film?
Yeah.
And I do want to reach out to the filmmaker directly and go, are you talking about Emerson, Manitoba? Because, it was a border. Apparently it was a war from the south, like kind of an allusion to the and some sort of southern, military takeover of Canada. But
and then
even the idea of the drones feeding people just by
dropping hot pockets on them. Yeah. The Emerson Academy is the place that Wasis goes after she's captured, but it's all part of a whole. I think there. What is she trying to say? Did I say it on the broadcast or did I say it pre-show? I think here's the new boss, same as the old boss. Kind of thing is that the future points to like, does this ever end? I sort of wonder if that's one of the questions that asks. And it's another interesting thing about it is that it's a Canadian New Zealand production. Taika Waititi is involved in this. Alex Tarrant from NCIS Hawaii and Lord of the Rings. It's interesting because he plays a New Zealander. I don't think they ever say I'm from New Zealand, but people say
Niska says you're far from home.
You're not from here. Yeah, exactly.
You're
and
far from home. Yeah.
One of the cooler parts of this, and this is what I mean about incorporating more of the First Nations or Indigenous stuff into it, is that at one point he's threatened by a drone, and the drone's coming towards him, and he does a haka in front of it as if he's trying to draw them, and create a diversion.
But
he sort of
purpose.
sticks out.
He doesn't think he's casting a spell.
No. He sticks out his tongue and he's trying to draw them off. And I thought that is cool. That's an awesome sort of an inclusion. And it's something that, the character might actually do. It seemed absolutely in the realm of possibility. So that's kind of a neat thing too. It affects this kind of control has affected First Nations and Indigenous people and Aboriginal people throughout the globe for a long time, and whether you're here or living in Oceania or what have you.
Well, and it is, and they even as she's trying to get her Wasis medical care, and she learns from Amanda Plummer's character, what is
Roberta.
Roberta, thank you. The gizmos have AI now. They're not even, you know, at what point, saw a great tweet the other day saying AI isn't, you know, we're not going to get killed by it. It's just upping bureaucratic, day-to-day mundane bureaucratic cruelty. And yeah, that would be the horror of this world in a way. And this is maybe where they could have explored it a bit better, is it's like, you don't actually see, there's soldiers, yes, but there's no bad guy. There's just their context and machines, you know.
And there's one woman at the academy, but she's not, you know, I was really worried, and I'm kind of sick of the not in a storytelling way.
Yeah.
Not the reason to tell it, but cruelty narrative. I'm really conscious of. You see it whether it's Pan's Labyrinth or Cold Mountain, where that part takes over the whole story. And I'm currently reading The Underground Railroad, and I'm sort of petrified. You know, there's this slave hunter that's sort of made out to be all-seeing and all-knowing, and I'm like, oh, I'm praying that he doesn't, so that it doesn't become about him, you know, because that's sort of the danger. And there isn't in this, and that's another low-key aspect of it. And you're right, is that there's the soldiers, the drones, and there's like one woman at the academy, and who's sort of like the aunt character in Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
And she's pretty gross, but she's not, you know, there's not a, you know, a mustache twirly big bad in this. I don't necessarily
and it may be,
think so.
it's a 100-minute film.
Yeah.
Would adding 5 minutes to develop her character actually added any value? You know?
Yeah.
And so, and on that thought, I was going to ask, who is this film for? Maybe let me change that. Of course, I'm certain a lot of Indigenous folks were going to watch this film, and that Ms. Goulet would want them to watch this flick because it's, you know, that centering in that experience with, you know, representation matters, you know. But at the same time, you know, hey, you want everyone to watch your movie. What do you think she wants based on the text? She wants Indigenous people to come away with, an Indigenous watcher to come away with, versus a settler, a North American settler to come away with.
Yeah, I think there's a certain
And you can really
of...
say, you know, settlers and Indigenous in any of the, you know, European colonized world. Because this, you know, you can see why Taika Waititi would be interested in this film, you know. And even I'm looking at, if Miss Goulet's, I've got her Wikipedia page, and if it's not wrong, you know what? She is also, she's a non-Indigenous mother, or mother, and her Cree father. Interesting note, Jim. A former New Democrat MLA, member of the Legislative Assembly, in the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly. You know, small world.
Yeah.
Exactly. Given the nature of our conversation, but. Where was I going with that? Oh, for crying out loud.
Just basically what voice she was looking to.
Oh, there we go. Taika Waititi, or they met. I don't know. You know what? I'm not sure where I was going with that, but let me come.
Sure.
What do you think she would want us to take away from this film based on the text of it? Or she... Am I going to get blocked by someone else on Twitter going, I don't care what this is. I don't care what this thinks of me and my film.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah. But
seriously, like, is there something you think in the film that says, yeah, if a white, or a settler is watching this is what they should be walking away.
I think there's a couple things going on here. I think there's the whole notion of the village coming together to assist one another. At the start of the movie, she's trying to, Niska is trying to do it alone with Wasis. They've got a little school bus in the woods, and they get discovered, and she's got to, probably against her own. She doesn't seem to like other people at this point in her life, but she sort of is.
She's an indigenous woman in North America.
Yeah,
where
not even
less safety than the relative safety that an indigenous woman experiences now.
Yeah, and I think she just
the
reluctantly
asshat who killed a woman by throwing a trailer hitch at her.
Oh yeah,
on the side of the road. It's like, wow,
not in the movie, folks. This is a Thunder Bay actual news story. But I think there's aspects of community. There's a notion that you can find salvation in community, right? And I think that's a big part of it.
Each other. You can't do it alone.
Despite the fact that it's sort of it is a chosen one narrative, but behind that's a community. So it's chosen one. It's not like, well, I guess, Matrix, I guess he does have helpers. I'm thinking High Noon, he's got some help. It's sort of that individual against the force. But in this case, it's a little bit different. Community, you'll solve more problems with the community, I think. Also, there's the lead, several of the lead characters, the first few buildings are women, and I think that's important too. And they're able to hold their own, and they're able to, do all the things that the men characters do as well. And I think that's kind of not just the casting, but the presence and how they react to things too. I think that's really important. And to have Indigenous women star in this, and it's not just LMI Tailfeathers. There's several other characters, Sonomas, and there's a few others too that are other leaders of the community. There's the elders as well. So it's community, strength, and pride. I think are a couple of the themes that are important here. In my humble opinion, in my humble white opinion. But
first of all, quick hello to Matthew David Bowen, chiming in from Perth, Western Australia.
How you going?
Western Australia, yeah. Let's give the man a round of applause.
I'm wearing orange. I'm wearing orange today because it's Truth and Reconciliation Day this weekend, and you're supposed to wear orange. But if I wasn't, I'd be wearing my Brisbane Lions shirt because they're in the finals. The AFL Grand Finals this weekend against Collingwood.
Isn't that the other side of the country?
Go Brisbane. Yeah, almost. I think it's, I was going to say diagonally
opposite.
Up, but probably,
okay,
It's but my daughter flew from Melbourne to Perth, and it was, I believe, a 5.5-hour flight over land. You're not even touching the water.
Well, it's like going from BC to Toronto or something, flying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But back to this flick. And meaning in that, and you're talking about community, and again, they have some YA dystopian aspects, but another great example, Jim, of a film that, yes, there's this idea, and they are searching, but it's not the whole community isn't in like some crazy religious cult.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to, we got to find the chosen one. It's not the Matrix, where they're all just driven by that. They are driven about rescuing their children. They're driven about community and everything.
Yeah,
and yes, they have this prophecy, but it's not their sole dynamic, their soul motivating dynamic, their soul bind together. It's very, you know what? it's there's elders, there's like this really a multi-generational family. Like, we all live in a weird way, and for most of human history we lived in. And this is kind of a celebration of it without being too on the nose, like without being like, and sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I'm thinking of a lot of like capital C Christian cinema where they really hammer on this is why we're better than everyone. And I don't get that vibe from this.
No.
And maybe, Jim, going back to what you're saying about the lack of villains is it like a conscious choice when we're talking about, what the responsibility you and I have as settlers, as settlers, maybe it isn't her like, oh, it's the settlers, it's that other that's at fault. It's but this thing is still happening to us, and that person shooting at me isn't good, and the machine isn't, but they're not, it's not necessarily an us versus them. I don't get that vibe. Although, who knows?
Yeah.
It could also be like so many people can watch these kind of films and not see themselves reflected in it. Oh my goodness, that's a terrible person. And everyone kind of going, you mean you?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what I mean? Does that make any sense, Jim?
Yeah, no, it's definitely this movie's got and I made several notes that it's got a different approach in a lot of ways. The way it handles it's almost like a book. Sort of the danger of having like a main villain is it gives you the opportunity to get it wrong. And I think these are what's reflected in what's happening to this society. Or a million little horrors, like a million little tragedies, and rather than one big, like
feeding you from drones,
having your son not recognize you, because he's been brainwashed, or being unwilling to recognize you, and that sort of thing.
And later on in the film, when it just there's nothing to fix anymore, like it's done, I mean, who knows? In a part 2 with him, maybe he breaks free of that and is like, yeah, it's a horror I have to live with. Matthew David Bowen chimes in, basically when global warming turns the U.S. into a desert, Canada would become primary agricultural land as its tundra turns into temperate zones. That's exactly, Matthew, when the United States says, who are all these people? What are these people doing on our water and our arable land? Which may have been the kind of, who knows where Ms. Goulet was thinking when she wrote the script, but there's always it did feel like a world,
Yeah.
Like there was some thought put into the things that are unsaid. Which I also admire. I admire that economy, that it isn't just all explained to us.
Yeah.
That it is in every little historical detail. We hear a little bit in radio that's kind of off, and so you hear a touch of it, but not a, you see moments, you have these little moments, and then they're done, Jim, I don't know. I think it's time to move forward. I think it's time to move into. Whoopsie. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes, and I think we covered a good chunk of what I thought we would cover. The second bird she encounters, I believe, is a mourning dove. It looked a little different, but it was the one in the Emerson Academy exercise yard. But the
interesting symbolism there.
yeah, not a pigeon, but a mourning dove there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is a movie that won several Canadian Screen Awards, and It's always now we've done a few Canadian movies this year, so I'm feeling a little bit better. I was feeling a little guilty, but I like movies in Blackberry now, and I think this is our third Canadian movies. It's maybe a personal record
And
for us. So
an Indigenous film.
yes,
And definitely like would win the Isla. Remember the Isla test? You had the Bechdel
Yes, yep.
test, and then there's the Isla test. Indigenous
Yeah.
women, speaking to each other.
yes,
Um,
yeah.
Totally owns
Yeah.
that one.
We need to crack open a French movie next, French Canadian movie probably. And,
Yes, we do. Although, you know
a
what,
little
Ms. Goulet, hence the name. Like, I mean, it's like, boy, that's you think Cree, Goulet, that's so Manitoba, and even the Emerson reference.
yeah,
I gotta find out. It's gonna bug me, Jim.
need to go to Q&A.
Yeah. You know what? Right now I don't have anything else to add. I got questions. And I may, reach out to the filmmaker's publicist, just to see, if I get some answers to this. I will say, Matthew David Bowen in the chat says, referring back to that idea of the, climate change, the thing that's happening, and how it's going to create all these refugees, from these areas. And I think that is something that maybe she is exploring in this film a little, like hinting at it, which I think is really cool. Again, not giving us the whole thing, but also not just saying, well, everybody went, remember some of the 80s post-apocalyptic films where and then people went crazy. It's like, no, there's reasons built in, and not, well, human nature. Just off with that.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting, to see some more of that, of what, Matthew's referring to. And I think it's also a great, Denis Arcand's, the Decline of the American Empire. Which is still, I think it was the first French movie I saw, probably on late night Canadian television. Like I should say Quebec film I saw. And I think a late night Canadian television. Maybe not CKND, but one of those, 2:00 in the morning or midnight on CBC or something like that. Folks, thank you all so much. Matthew David Bowen, great to see you here, man. Let's make sure we get everyone a bit of air horn. And we saw Cody from the Brock Up side, who would love to collaborate with us, Jim, if we want to go see the creator as part of our thing. And that might be an interesting thing, to dive into AI a little more. And then, of course, a guy we haven't seen, the hardest working man in the film YouTube space, Sean from Lost in the Rail. Great to see you here. So let's, air horns for everybody. Everybody, thank you all so much for coming. Of course, you can subscribe. Oh, please. A like, a subscribe, a ringy ding of that bell. And then, that way you could watch something else we made. Good night, everybody.
Go Brisbane.